Hey guys, hello everyone and welcome to the channel. So this is the first video of this 10 new question series. As I told you in the previous video that we are going to start this new series for the upcoming CSIRNet and GATE exam. In this series, I'm going to give you totally new questions which have not been asked in the previous years of CSIRNet or GATE exam. These are like a kind of new type of questions. And also I have said that before uploading the solution on this channel, I'll give those questions in prior, like 2 days prior, I'll upload the questions and you can try it of yourself and then we will solve the question, right? So do let me know in the comment sections below that which topic you want next to make this 10 new questions on, and I'll make those questions, I'll upload those questions accordingly and I'll post that on the community tab. So stay tuned. Please subscribe the channel if you have not subscribed it yet. That will just help you to like get to know the new questions whenever it is going to get uploaded, right? So now without wasting any time, we'll start 10 new questions on coordination chemistry for this particular video. Alright, so this is the first question. It says that if the magnetic moment of complex, which is K3COF6, is 5 like mu b, then the total stabilization energy will be, okay, so they're asking around what's the total stabilization energy. Now here the concept of pairing energy and CFS is going to come. So one thing which you have to remember is this pairing energy, okay, pairing energy, how to calculate pairing energy. This particular thing you should know, okay, how to calculate pairing energy. I'll just give you a brief idea of it. So pairing energy is only observed in low spin complexes, okay. So you need low spin complex to calculate the pairing energy. In low spin complexes, you find out that how many electrons are being paired up, and then you also find out for the high spin complex that how many electrons are paired up, and then you subtract, because you just want to know that how many pairing are happening because of the ligand. That's what is your pairing energy concept. Now here if you see, so the complex which is given to us is K3COF6. Now here cobalt is in +3 state, right? That's the oxidation state of this. This is a D6 system, and this system is a high spin complex because fluorine being a weak field ligand over here. So this is going to give you a high spin complex, and there is no concept of pairing energy in high spin complexes. So you don't even have to solve this question. Even if you want, you can do it, of course. That you can do, like you can fill the electrons in the T2G and EG orbitals like this. You can calculate the delta O total all, but basically what you have to understand is in high spin complex there is no pairing energy, okay. So pairing energy concept does not comes here, and since there should be no pairing energy, there is only one option which does not have pairing energy. So that's why option number A is your correct option. Now I just want to know that how many of you understand the concept of pairing energy. So I'm just changing the question a little bit. I'm making it K3CO and let's say CN6, okay. That's the complex I'm having. Now you guys have to tell me, and don't worry about this mu b, okay. You just have to look upon the complex and you have to tell me that which of these are going to be the correct answer now, okay, after having K3COCN6 as our ligand, okay. So I want your answers in the comment section below. Alright, let's go to the next question. This was pretty simple. Let's go to the next one. It says which of the following coordination compound exhibit optical activity. Now in order to gain this optical activity, what is required over here is that there should be absence of, okay, absence of plane of symmetry. So plane of symmetry should not be present in the complex, okay. That should not be there in the complex. Make these complexes quickly. So the first one is your cis, CONH3 whole 4 Cl2. So if I make this, so I'll be making it in this way. All right, so I have cis, so let's make it like chlorine, chlorine, and then I have NH3, NH3, and NH3, right? So this is how I am having. Now this is the octahedral complex. It, of course, it is going to have a plane of symmetry. The plane is going to pass in between of a molecule like this, okay. So this is the plane of symmetry which is present. So this is not going to be optically active. This is achiral molecule. Same if you draw the second one, the trans isomer, again that also will have a plane of symmetry. You can try it of your own. the plane of symmetry will be the diagonal plane. Okay, so that is also again not going to be optically active. Looking upon option number C, where you have a bidentate ligand which is En. Now here if I draw this, so I am going to get the complex somewhat like this. Now this is a cis complex, so let me bring the chloride over here. Now the nitrogen of En are here. Okay, so this is how the complex is going to look like, and the trans isomer of this if I make, so that is going to go something like, let's say, chlorine, chlorine, they are now trans to each other, and then N of your ethylene diamine. Okay, so I'm not making the complete chain, I'm just showing it as an illustration over here. So yeah, that's what it is. Now the plane of symmetry is present in this one. You can just have a plane of symmetry like this, which is bisecting the molecule into two equal half, sorry. So that makes this one achiral. Option number C is the correct option. Okay, it is the optical, it is going to show the optical activity. So yeah, you will not have any plane of symmetry in this molecule. Okay, you cannot bisect this into equal half using any plane over here. Alright, let's look upon this question here. It says that if CFSC is 13,200 centimeter inverse for the complex of cobalt 2 and the spin pairing energy, that is P, is 11,700 centimeter inverse, then what is the correct statement? Now, first thing which you can see over here is the cobalt is in +2 state. That means it's a D7 species, right? So it has 7 d electrons over here. Second thing which you have to look upon is regarding the energy distribution. So you have the pairing energy which is 11,700, and that pairing energy is actually smaller than your CFSC, right? Or your delta O, you can say. So your pairing energy is smaller than CFSC. This is the condition for low spin complexes. So there are two conditions how you get high spin and low spin complex. If the pairing energy is smaller, then the complex will undergo pairing of electron instead of going to the higher state. Okay, so that's what happens. So here also is the condition where pairing energy is smaller than CFSC, and that's why instead of going to the higher state, it will undergo pairing. So 7 electrons will be filled something like this. So 1 2 3 4 5 6, that's how 6 electrons will be filled, and this is the 7th electron. So that's how we are going to fill it. So it's a low spin complex, that is correct statement. And second thing is that since now we have asymmetrical electron filling in the in the whole system, that means that Eg orbital is asymmetrically filled, and that's why Jahn-Teller distortion is going to come, right? So in order to get Jahn-Teller distortion, the condition is that your Eg set of orbital should be asymmetrically filled, and that's why the complex will be Jahn-Teller distorted, and the correct answer is going to be option number A. Alright, so this is how we are going to do. So just by the basic concepts, we will be able to do this question. Let's go to the next one then. Here it says that in the transition complex titanium H2O6 2 plus, the total number of electronic transition and the lowest energy transitions are given by. Okay, so you have to tell the total number of transition and the lowest energy transition both. So this will be done by the concept of Orgel diagram. Okay, that's the concept which we are going to use. So titanium +2 is what we have. So that means that this is a D2 system. Okay, now for D2 system, if you know the Orgel diagram, how we draw that particular Orgel diagram, so it goes like your T1G, then goes your T2G, then goes your A2G, and then goes your T1GP. So this is F set of orbitals, and this is P. So that's how the D2 set of electrons, or you can say D2 configuration, has this type of Orgel diagram, right? Now to look upon the number of transitions over here, see this T1G state will come when you are going to have T2G2 electronic configuration, means both the electrons are in T2G orbital, right? So that's what we will be having here. This is going to come when you will have T2G1 and EG1. That means one electron will be excited to the EG state and one electron is staying in the T2G state. This is basically for the P level, so that's a different thing. And A2G, this is going to come when you will be having EG2, means both the electrons have reached to the EG state. Now this transition is obviously allowed because one electron transition is happening, and that's fine. Laporte forbidden, one electron transition. And is it spin allowed? So yeah, spin allowed transition is happening. So yes, this will be allowed. Also from here to here, when you are making the transition from T1GF to T1GP, this particular transition is also allowed. Here basically you are making the transition from a state which is of different term to the different term, so that is also allowed. But this transition from T1GF to A2G is not going to be allowed. That is a forbidden transition. Okay, so that makes only two possible transitions. So the number of transitions which are possible is 2, and the lowest transition which is going to happen will be from your they are asking lowest energy transition. So the lowest energy difference is between T1GF and T2GF. So that means that, and since because in both the cases the electrons will be unpaired, so you will be having 3 over here. Okay, so let us write down so that spin does not changes throughout. So yeah, so that means this is the lowest energy transition, and that is going to be your correct answer. Okay, any other option is not matching it. If you are looking upon the orgel diagram, you will be simply able to answer it just based upon the transition itself, because the lowest energy state will be 3T1G, and the only transition which is arising from 3T1G is option number D. So that is also one of the way of reaching out to the correct option. I hope this is clear. Let's go to the next question then. Okay, now this is from your magnetochemistry. Okay, it says that the graph plotted between chi t versus t for showing the magnetic susceptibility of a paramagnetic complex following Curie's equation, okay, at various temperature is best represented by. So which of these represents the Curie's temperature, okay, or the Curie's law or Curie's equation? So this is done by magnetochemistry of coordination complexes, and basically it is from your Curie's law. So what does your Curie's law say? It says that magnetic susceptibility is proportional to 1 upon T, or you can say, or that means the magnetic susceptibility of the substance depends upon the magnetic susceptibility of paramagnetic substance, basically depends inversely upon the temperature change, or that can be, the proportionality can be replaced with a Curie constant. So that's the equation. Now this is an exponential kind of equation, so that means as my T will become 0, the susceptibility will increase. Okay, it will become infinity. So that means as my T will become 0, this susceptibility should increase. That's only in option number A. So this shows a exponential decay kind of graph, and this is how it is going to be represented. So option A is correct equation, and it's a very famous very famous graph, or you can say very famous equation when you study magnetochemistry in the coordination complexes. All right, let's take the next question. This is very simple question. You just have to look upon it very carefully. It says choose the option that correctly matches the transition metal complex in list 1 with their respective colors in list 2. Now this is from your color of the complexes. Okay, color like color and electronic transition. So that's the topic. Fine. So the question says you have to match the color of them. Now just write down the electronic configurations, basically what type of species they are. So this is iron in +3 state, that means a D5 species. Here you are having zinc in +2 state, that means a D10 species. Okay, I'm just writing them how the way they are. This one is cobalt in +2 state, so that means it's a D7 species, and that too a tetrahedral one. Okay, so it's a D7 species in tetrahedral field, and here this is a D8 species in octahedral field. Now you just have to look upon the colors of, like, you just have to match the colors of them. Now what you have to understand is that in among these, if you see, so zinc is the one where no transition can happen. The transition between the two states is totally forbidden. It's Laporte forbidden also, and it's spin forbidden also, because all the 10 electrons are already filled, so you cannot do any transition over there. So if some that means it is not going to absorb the light, and that's why it is not going to give any light of it, right? So these type of substances will look colorless. Okay, so the substance which does not absorbs light or does not emit light, that is basically colorless in color. So your B should be matched with 4th. Now the only option where B is matched with 4th is option number B. Now that is the only way of reaching out to the correct answer. Rest of them will automatically arrange themselves. There is one more way to approach to the answer based upon your CFSC, like you can calculate the CFSC and then look upon the color wheel to try to like match them up. Okay, so V, B, G, Y, O, R. So you just have to look upon the lower in the energy should have higher like output. Okay, the complementary color should be of the higher color. Okay, so here it says that which of the following transition metal oxide has the highest Tn, that is Neal's temperature value. Okay, right. So the question is about Neal's temperature, that is given by Tn, and Neal's temperature is a measure of antiferromagnetic, right? FERRO. So antiferromagnetic property. So Neal's temperature measures the antiferromagnetic properties, and all of these elements, all of these complexes, or you can say all of these metal oxides will come under antiferromagnetic like behavior. They all are going to show antiferromagnetic behavior. And there is a concept called as antiferromagnetic coupling. Okay, so antiferromagnetic coupling depends upon your metal oxide bond. So that means ki in among all these metal oxides, the strength of this metal oxide bond is going to decide the antiferromagnetic coupling, and higher the antiferromagnetic coupling will be there, the more value of Neal's temperature will be there. Okay, so antiferromagnetic coupling will be equivalent, or you can say proportional to the Neal's temperature. So we need to find out the strength of metal oxide bond. Now here we have manganese, iron, nickel and cobalt all in +2 state. We just have to arrange them in the order of their size first of all. Just arrange them according to the size. Manganese is the biggest one, then comes your iron, then comes cobalt, and then comes nickel. So nickel is the smallest one among them. So the smallest being the smallest one, and since all of them are in +2 state, so that means ki all of them, you just have to look upon their relative positions in the periodic table to understand the size, because the charges are same. So nickel being smallest, okay, this is smallest among all. So the nickel oxygen bond will also be the smallest one, right? Because the metal itself is smallest. So that makes this complex, or you can say this metal oxide, to have the strongest metal oxide bond, and higher the metal oxide bond, higher will be antiferromagnetic coupling, and higher will be Neal's temperature for that. Okay, or higher will be the value of Tn for that. So the correct option will be option number C. So whenever the question comes about Neal's temperature, it is directly proportional to antiferromagnetic coupling, and that is dependent upon the metal and the ligand bond. So higher the metal ligand bond, or sorry, the strongest the metal ligand bond, the higher will be the Neal's temperature. Now here, since the oxidation state were same, we just looked upon the sizes. If the oxidation state would have been different, then we would have looked upon the positive charges also in order to understand the strength of that bond. All right. Okay, I guess you have understood. Let's go to the next question. It says, identify the complexes that can exhibit 4T2G to 4T1G transition as the lowest energy band in its electronic spectrum. Again, this is question from your Orgel diagram. Okay, so that's what we have to see. All right, so let's look upon this. Here cobalt is in +2 state, here vanadium is in +3 state, cobalt in +3 state, and here nickel is again in +2 state. Here the system will be a D7 high spin system. Here this is going to be D2 high spin system. Here this is going to be this is going to be a D6 system, right? So D6 system in a low spin. Okay, why low spin? I have many times I have explained that cobalt in +3 state with nickel and like nitrogen and oxygen donors behave as a low spin complex. It's a low spin complex. So here you cannot apply Orgel diagram concept, but I'll explain you how to do. And then nickel in +2 is a D8 species. So all of them are high spin except this one. Cobalt in +2, if you try to do it, if you try to fill the electrons, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, and if you see you have 3 unpaired electrons, so the ground state of this complex will be like 4T1G. I'm just writing the ground state here. Okay, about vanadium plus 3, that means for D2 system, of course the ground state term for this is going to be 3 T1G. Why I am writing 3 here? Because here we write down the spin multiplicity and we have 2 unpaired electrons, so 2 plus 1 will be 3. Here we have 3 unpaired electrons, so that's why it will be 4 here, right? Again, going for this, of course this is a high spin complex, so 1 2 3 4 5 6, this type of things, like this type of filling comes under your A1G, and since you are having 0 over here, sorry 1 over here, because you don't have any unpaired electron in this case. D8 when you are filling, so that is again a symmetrical electron filling, it seems. So 5 6 7 and 8, this is A2G, and here the electrons will be, because 2 unpaired electrons, so 3. So this is how we write down the ground state terms of this. I hope you understand and you know how to write it down. Now the only one which can give you 4 T1G to 4 T2G, that means the spin multiplicity matches with what is being asked, is option number A. Rest of them does not have the same spin multiplicities. Their spin multiplicities are different, so you cannot consider them at all. So option A will be correct. Now I'll just quickly show you that how it actually happens. So if let's say this is my state, which is right now 4 T1G, that's the ground state. After making the transition, this is going to undergo like this. Okay, so you will be having like this. So those who have studied from me and those who have taken my classes in detail, where I have already explained that how to write down Mulliken terms for the given electronic configuration, they already have understood that for this I have to write down T2G, and since I have 3 unpaired electrons, so that's why it will be 4. So that's how it goes, and the correct answer for this particular question is going to be option number C, that means first only. Rest of them cannot be considered. This is how it has to be done. Let's go to the next question. Okay, it says consider the following reaction. Now here metal is there, ethylene diamine, OH2 whole twice, 2 plus, okay fine, I should give a arrow over here. What is the correct increasing order of formation constant K1, K2 and K3 for M is equals to cobalt, nickel and copper? So you have 3 different metals given. You have to tell that what is the value of, okay, let's say that the rate constant over here is K. So when I'm putting cobalt plus 2, it becomes K1. When I'm putting nickel plus 2, it's becoming K2. And when I'm putting copper plus 2, it's becoming K3. So which of these is going to have the correct order of the formation constant? That means you have to form from here to this. So let's try to understand how to do this. Okay, it's very interesting question. All right, so to solve this question, what you have to understand is the geometry of the complex which is getting formed. Now let's talk about copper first of all, because that's the easiest one to understand. Let's say that I am forming with some rate constant K3. I'm not writing the reactant. The final product is copper En whole thrice plus 2. What does that mean? It means that I have copper in plus 2 state. That means I have a D9 system here, and that means that this is going to have a strong Jahn-Teller distortion, right? A strong Jahn-Teller distortion. And you know that when the Jahn-Teller distortion comes, the geometry tries to become elongated or compressed on the axial side, and this the chelating effect of this bidentate ligand will try to suppress that change in the geometry. You can understand it in this way. Let's say I have copper and I have these bonds like this. So since ethylene diamine will be formed around it somewhat like this, so when these bonds will try to elongate, there will be strain which will be observed in these bonds, which will make the whole molecule very unstable, and that's why this is very unfavorable to form. So K3 will have lowest value because these are nothing but rate of formation, okay, or formation constant. So K3 should be least, okay, among all of them. So that means K3 cannot be highest. Option A is incorrect. Option D is also incorrect. Okay, let's look upon the others now. Now simply you have to understand the others also in the same way. Let's say if I have cobalt in plus 2 state, this is a D6 system, and if I take nickel in plus 2 state, so this is again a D8 system. Now if I fill the electrons here in the D6 system, so that will be filled like 1 2 3 4 5 and 6. Now here again I have Jahn-Teller distortion, although it's not that strong, so it's a weak John Taylor distortion, whereas when I do it for the nickel complex, I will find that since there is a symmetrical electron filling, there is no John Taylor distortion in this case. Now, since there is no John Taylor distortion in the nickel case, that's why no strain and nothing will be observed, and that's why nickel will be the complex which can easily form, or which can easily get formed in this particular tris complex, right? So that makes this nickel as most favorable one to undergo this particular transition, and that makes K3, sorry, nickel was corresponding to K2, right? So that makes K2 to be highest one and K1 to be the medium one. So the order goes like K3 should be smallest and K2 should be highest and K1 in the middle. That's our option number B, and that's how this will be done. Okay, so this is how it should be done. I hope you understood the concept. So see how beautifully John Taylor distortion is used to understand the rate constant in this case. Let's go to the last question of this video. Okay, the last question is pretty simple. Here it says that the effective total magnetic moment of K3 FeCN6 is. Pretty simple question. Iron over here is in +3 oxidation state. This is nothing but a D5 species, and a D5 species will have and that too a low spin species. Why? Because of presence of CN ligand. Okay, now because of that you are going to fill the electrons in the octahedral field somewhat like 1 2 3 4 5 6 sorry 1 2 3 4 5, just like that. So unpaired electrons, if you have to do, so unpaired electrons are just one, and the one unpaired electron is going to give you the mu spin only. Okay, spin only value is equals to your n plus 2. That's the formula, right? So n plus 2 is the formula, where n is the unpaired number of unpaired electrons. So it will be how much? That will be 1 into 1 plus 2, and once you solve this, you are going to get under root 3, and that is 1.732. Now that's the value in, that is spin only in Bohr magneton. Okay, that's value which you are going to get. But one thing which you have to consider is there is a orbital contribution which comes when this T2g orbital is asymmetrically filled. So whenever this T2g orbital is asymmetrically filled, there is something which is called as orbital contribution, and that also comes, and the effective magnetic moment increases from some value of spin only value. So we cannot calculate that orbital contribution as a number itself, but what you have to consider is the answer, or the total effective magnetic moment, will not remain just spin only, but it will increase a little bit. So what you can say that mu effective will be like mu spin only and plus mu orbital contribution, the one which comes from the orbital contribution. Now this will be some number, but it's not very big. Okay, it's just a very small value. So if you just add some small value than this, so your answers are like 1.7 and just a little bit higher value is 1.9. So the answer can be 1.9 just by adding a little bit. Now understand that whenever these type of questions are asked, and if they have just given you to effective total magnetic moment, and if you are seeing orbital contribution, add a very little value and just answer the value which is just a little bit more than the mu spin value. Okay, that is probably the correct answer for that particular question. Okay, so we have done 10 questions in this video. I hope you understood all the 10 of them. Do let me know in the comments which topics you guys want me to make the next video on, and which topic shall we discuss next. I hope this series will help you to understand new concept, to understand and to build up some new tricks for solving more questions. All right, so that's the main motive of this particular series. Thank you so much for watching the video. I will see you guys in the next one. Till then, have a great day. Bye bye.
Hey guys, so I teach live on Unacademy Plus platform. Here I teach for the CSIR UGC NET category, and you can follow me over here for regular classes. You can access my free classes as well as my paid classes on this particular platform. The classes which are free, you can get that under the section of special classes, whereas in order to access my paid classes, paid live classes, you have to take Unacademy Plus subscription. So do make sure that you take the Unacademy Plus subscription to access all my paid classes, which are quite organized. The whole syllabus is being completed over there, and the classes are quite regular over there. So make sure that you take Unacademy Plus subscription by using my referral code, that is N_Huda. That's it for this. Thank you so much.